the 11 story in the middle. Meanwhile, he placed the sack on his shoulder and went after the animals. Meanwhile, he encountered a certain man, and he panicked as before, even though it was slightly comforting to him to find a person there. How did you come here? The man asked him. He replied, asking him, how did you come here? I, my fathers and my fathers' fathers were raised here. He answered him, but you, how did you come here? Because nobody ever comes here from civilization. He panicked because he understood that this was not a human being at all, since he said that his fathers' fathers were raised here and nobody from civilization came here. Therefore, Yavam understood that this was certainly not a human being at all. Nonetheless, he did not do anything to him and drew him close, that is, this man of the forest, to the king's true son, and said to him, that is, the man of the forest, to the king's true son, what are you doing here? Well, he answered him that he was running after his animals. The man of the forest said to him, stop chasing after your sins. Those are not animals at all, but rather your sins are leading you on. It is enough for you already. You have received what you deserve. That is, you have already received your punishment. Now, stop chasing them anymore. Come along with me, and you will come to what is fitting for you. He went with him. He went with him. He was afraid to speak with him or to ask him, because a man like this might open his mouth and swallow him. That is, the king's true son went with the man of the forest, and he was afraid to speak with him or ask him anything, lest he open his mouth and swallow him, because he understood that this was not a human being at all. He followed after him. Meanwhile, he encountered his friend who chased after the horse. As soon as he saw him, he hinted to him, you should know that this is not a human being at all. Don't interact with him at all, because this is not a human being at all. He immediately went and whispered all of this to him in his ear, that this is not a human being at all. His friend had looked, that is the horseman, and saw that the sack with bread and saw the sack with bread on his shoulder. He began to appeal to him, my brother, I have not eaten in many days. Give me bread. Here in the wilderness there is nothing to offer. He replied, my life takes priority and I need the bread for myself. He began to appeal to him and beseech him strongly. I will give you whatever I can, and however no price or gift will suffice in exchange for bread in the wilderness. He replied to him, what can you give me? What can you give me in exchange for bread in the wilderness? He answered him, that is, the one who asked for bread, the horseman. Answered the man with the animals, who was the king's true son, I will give you my entire self. I will sell myself to you in exchange for bread. He decided, that is, the man with the animals decided to himself, that to purchase a man it would be worth it to give him bread. He acquired him as an eternal slave. He made him swear oaths that he would be a slave to him forever. He made him swear oaths that he would be a slave to him forever. Even when they came to civilization and he gave him bread, they ate together from the sack until the bread was finished. Together they followed after the man of the forest. The slave walked behind him, i.e., the horseman, who was sold as a slave to the man with the animals, walked behind him, behind the man with the animals, and the two of them walked behind the man of the forest. This made things a little bit easier for him when he needed to lift something or some other task. He would command his slave, the horseman who was sold to him as a slave, to lift it and to do what he wanted. They followed. They followed together behind the man. Followed together behind the man of the forest. They came to a place where there were snakes and scorpions, and grew very afraid. Out of fear he asked the man of the forest, He asked the man of the forest, "How can we pass through here?" "Here's an even tougher one," he replied. "How will you enter and come to my house?" He showed them his house, which was standing in the air. "How will you get into my house?" They went to the man of the forest, and he brought them through in peace. He brought them into his house, gave them food and drink, and he went away. The king's true son, who was the man with the animals, used his slave for whatever he needed. The slave was very upset that he had been sold as a slave because of a single hour in which he needed bread to eat, because now they had what to eat, and just because of a single hour he would have to be a slave forever. He would sigh and groan, "How did I come to this state to be a slave?" The king's true son, who was his master, asked him, "What status did you have that you are groaning over the fact that you have come to this state?" He replied to him and told him how he was a king, and that they were gossiping about him, that he had been switched. For this horseman was actually the very same king from before, who was really the maidservant's son, and who had been banished his friend. At one point it had come into his mind that what he had done was not good, and he regretted it, etc. He felt constant regret over this evil and grave treachery that he had committed against his friend. Once he dreamt that his rectification was to abandon the monarchy and to go to the place where his eyes took him, and in this way he would rectify his sin. He didn't want to do this, but his dreams were constantly bothering him to do it, until he made up his mind that he would do it. He abandoned the monarchy, and he went where he went, until he came here, and now he became a slave. He heard all of this and kept silent. That is the king's true son. The man with the animals heard all this, that the horseman who was now his slave told him, and he kept silent. He said, "I will see, and I will decide how to deal with this." At night the man of the forest came and gave them food and drink. They slept there. Towards morning they heard the very great sound of laughter, as before, to the extent that all the trees were rustling and shaking as before. He urged him, that is the slave urged the king's true son, who was his master, to ask the man of the forest about this. He asked him, "What is this great sound of laughter close to the morning?" "This is laughter," he replied, "that the day becomes merry. From the halvai, the night asked the day, why is it when you come that I have no name? Then the day gets merry and makes great laughter, and then it becomes day." That explains the sound of the laughter. Why is it when you come that I have no name? Then the day gets merry and makes great laughter, and then it becomes day. That explains the sound of the laughter. This seemed amazing to him, for this was something extraordinary, that the day gets merry from the night. In the morning the man of the forest went away. Again, they ate and drank there. In the evening he came back, and they ate and drank and slept through the night. They heard the sound of the wild animals, who were all roaring and making noise with different sounds. All the wild animals and birds were producing sounds. One type of lion was roaring, and another type of lion was making a different sound. The birds were whistling and chattering with their voices. They were all making noisy sounds. At first they were very shaken. Out of fear they did not pay close attention to the sound. Later they paid closer attention and heard that it was a very, very wondrous sound of music and song. It was an extremely awesome and powerful pleasure to hear it. All the pleasures in the world were like nothing, completely worthless and null in relation to the awesome pleasure of this song. They said to each other that they should remember this, for they had what to eat and drink, and they were luxuriating in this awesome pleasure, which all forms of pleasure were nullified in relation to. The slave urged his master, that is the king's true son, to ask the man of the forest for an explanation. He answered him, this is related to how the sun makes a garment for the moon. All of the wild animals of the forest said that since the moon does them great good, since the main time of their dominion is at night, because sometimes they need to go into civilization, and during the day they cannot, and the illumination of the moon does them good. Therefore they agreed to make a new song to honor the moon. And this is the melodious, and this is the melodious song that you hear. That is that all the wild animals and birds sing a new melody in honor of the sun, of the moon, which receives a garment from the sun. When they heard that it was a melody, they paid closer attention, and they heard that it was a very, very wondrous, pleasant melody. The man of the forest said to them, "You think that is impressive? I have an instrument that I received from my fathers who inherited. I have an instrument that I received from my fathers who inherited it from their fathers' fathers. This instrument is made out of leaves and colorful things. When you place this instrument on an animal or bird, then it immediately begins to play this melody." Then the laughter happened again as before, and it became day. He, that is the king's true son, went to search for the instruments. He searched all over the room, but could not find it. Aaiiiinnn. The laughter happened again as before, and it became day. Then the laughter happened again as before, and it became day. Then the laughter happened again as before, and it became day. Then the laughter happened again as before, and it became day. Then the laughter happened again as before, and it became that is the king's true son, went to search for the instrument. He searched all over the room but could not find it. He was afraid to go any further than that. They, that is the master, the king's true son, and the slave, the maidservant's true son, who was initially the king, were afraid to tell the man of the forest to guide them back to civilization. Later on, the man of the forest came and told them that he would guide them back to civilization. He led them back to civilization. He took the instrument and gave it to the king's true son. He said to him, "I'm giving you the instrument. And regarding this man that is his slave, the maidservant's true son, who was initially king because of the switch, you will know how to deal with him." They asked him, "Where do we go?" They asked him, where do we go? He told them that they should ask and inquire about a land with this name, the foolish land with the wise king, the nachman land. In der Kliege Malchus, the nachman, in der Kliege Malchus. This is the language in which our rabbi nachman, nachma, meuman, mace, lampshine told it. They asked him where. He asked him where. They asked him where and in which direction. Where and in which direction should we begin to ask about this land? With his hand he indicated a certain direction, pointing his finger. The man of the forest said to the king's true son, "Go there to that land, and there you will come to your greatness." So they went. They were walking on their way, and they very much wanted to find some wild or domestic animal to test whether the instrument would play its melody, but as yet they did not see any type of animal. Afterwards they came further into civilization. They found an animal and placed the instrument on it, and it began to play the melody from before. They kept going, going until they came to the aforementioned land. This land had a wall surrounding it. There was no way to enter it except through a single gate. It was necessary to walk around for many miles before coming to the gates and enter the land. They proceeded to go around until they came to the gate. As they approached the gate, they did not want to let them enter. Since the king of the land had died, they were behind the king's son. And the king had placed in his will whoever, wherefore, until now, the land was called the Narshalam, in the Kliga Malchis, the foolish land with the wise king. Now it will be called the opposite, the Kliga land, in the Narshamalchis, the wise land with the foolish king. And one who wants to gird his loins for this, to restore the original name, that is, that to have the land again be called by its first name, the foolish land, with the wise king. Such person will become king. Therefore they did not let anyone enter the land, except for someone who would gird his loins for this purpose, to return the land to its original name. It was certainly impossible to get himself involved in something like this, so they could not enter. His slave insisted that they go back home, but he did not want to go back, since the man of the forest told him to go to this land, and never he would come to his greatness. Meanwhile another man came along, riding on a horse. He wanted to enter, but they did not let him enter either. For the aforementioned reason, meanwhile he noticed this man's horse standing there. He took the instrument and placed it above on the horse, and it began to sing the very wondrous melody. The man with the horse pleaded with him very much, for him to sell him the instruments. But he did not want to sell it. He asked him, "What can you give me in exchange for such a marvelous instrument as this?" The man with the horse said to him, "What can you do with an instrument like this? Why, all you can do with it is perform theatrics and receive a dinner, a coin. But I know something which is much better than your instrument. That is, that I know something that I received from my father's fathers, to understand one thing from another. That is, that I know something which I received from my father's fathers, which enables the understanding of one thing from another. So when somebody says something, it is possible through the tradition. I have to understand one thing from another. I have not yet revealed this to anyone in the world. Therefore I will teach you this, and you will give me the instrument." He decided, the king's true son, who had the instrument, that it was truly something wondrous to understand one thing from another. So he gave him the instrument, and he settled his mind, and then he decided. So he gave him the instrument, and he, that is the man with the horse, went and taught him how to be able to understand one thing from another. I went, and he, that is the man with the horse, went and taught him how to be able to understand one thing from another. The king's true son, since he had become able to understand one thing from another, went to the gate of the land. He understood that he had the ability to gird his loins for this, to return the land to its original name, for he was already able to understand one thing from another. Therefore he understood that it was possible, even though he still didn't know precisely how he would be able to do it. Nevertheless, since he had become able to understand one thing from another, he understood that it was possible. He decided that it would be ordered to let him, that it should be ordered to let him enter, and he would get himself involved in this. That is, to return the land to its original name. What was there to lose? He said to the men who did not want to let anyone enter there except for one who would gird his loins for the task, that they should let him enter. And he would gird his loins for the task of returning the land to its original name. They let him enter, and they let the nobleman know that a man had been found who wanted to gird his loins for the task of returning the land to its original name. They brought him to the noble meuman of the land. The noble meuman said to him, "You should know that we are not fools. Perish the thought." However, the previous king was extraordinarily wise. Compared to him, we were all considered fools. Therefore the land was called the foolish land, with the wise king. Then the king died, leaving behind the king's son, who was also wise, but in relation to us, he is not wise at all. Therefore the land is now called the opposite, the wise land, with the foolish king. The king left in his will that someone who would be found to be wise enough that he could return the land to its original name. Such person would be king. He commanded his son that when this man would be found, he would be removed from the monarchy, and that man would become king. That is, when such a man would be found, who would be extraordinarily wise, in relation to whom everyone would be fools. Such a man would become king, for this man could return the land to its original name, so they would once again call it the foolish land with the wise king. For everyone would be fools compared to him. Therefore you should know who you are getting yourself into, what you are getting yourself into. All this was said to him by the noblemen. They said to him, that is, these noblemen again. This is all a continuation of their words. The test of us will be whether you are indeed wise. There is a garden that remains from the previous king. For there is a garden that remains from the previous king, who was extremely wise. And the garden has very, very wondrous metal instruments grow there, silver instruments and gold instruments, and it is very, very wondrous and awesome. However, it is impossible to enter it. When a person enters it, then they immediately begin to chase him, and they chase him and he screams. But he does not know what is happening, nor does he see who is chasing him. And so they chase him until they run him out of the garden. Therefore we will see if you are wise, if you are able to enter this garden. He asked if they beat the person who enters. They told him that the main thing is that they chase him, and he has no idea at all who is chasing him, and he flees in great panic. That is what people who entered there told them. He went to the garden, that is the king's true son, and saw that it had a surrounding wall. The gate was open, and there were no guards there, because surely no guards were needed for this garden. He was walking by the garden, and he looked and saw a man standing there by the garden. That is, there was a statue of a man there. He looked and saw that above the man there was a sign, and it was written there that the man was king many hundreds of years before. In the days of this king there was peace. Before this king there was war, and after him there was war. But in the days of this king there was peace. He understood, since he had already become able to understand one thing from another, that the whole thing depended upon this man. When he would enter the garden and they would chase him, there was no need at all to run away, just to stand himself by the man, and through this he would be safe. Furthermore, if he took this man and placed him inside in the midst of this garden, then everyone would be able to enter this garden in peace. All this the king's true son understood. Since he understood one thing from another, he went and entered the garden. As soon as they began to chase him, he went and stood by the man that stood by the garden on the outside. Through this he emerged in peace without any incident at all. Other people, when they would enter the garden and they would begin to pursue them, they would flee in very great panic and would get battered and suffer from this. But he emerged in peace and tranquility. By standing himself by the man, the noblemen saw and were astonished over how he emerged in peace. He, the king's true son, then ordered to take the man and position it inside in the midst of the garden. And so they did. And then all the noblemen went into the garden, and they entered and emerged in peace without any incident at all. Nevertheless, the nobleman said to him, even though we have seen what you can do still, for the sake of a single accomplishment, it is not proper to give you the monarchy. We will test you again with something else. They said to him, here there is a throne from the previous king. Said to him, here there is a throne from the previous king. The throne is very high. Near the throne stand all sorts of wood and wild animals and birds. That is, they are carved and crafted from wood. In front of the throne stands a bed. By the bed stands a table, and on the table there stands a lamp. from the throne. Roads emerge, and the roads are built with walls. These roads emerge from the throne on all sides, and nobody has any idea what this throne with these roads are all about. These roads, after they emerge and extend for some distance, there stands there a golden lion. If a person were to go and come near it, then it would open its mouth and swallow him, because beyond this lion, the road extends further. And likewise for the other roads that emerge from the throne, that is the second road which emerges from the throne, on another side is also the same way. As the road extends and continues for some distance, there stands there another type of wild animal, such as a different type of metal lion, and there too it is impossible to come close to it. And beyond it, the road extends further. And likewise for the other roads, these roads extend and go throughout the entire land. And nobody knows the meaning of the throne with all the things around it and the roads. Therefore you shall be tested with this, whether you can comprehend the meaning of the throne with all of the aforementioned things. They showed him the throne, and he saw that it was very high, etc. He walked by the throne, and he looked and understood that the throne was made of the same type of wood as the box from before, that is the instrument which the man of the forest gave him. He looked and saw that the throne was missing a rose on top. If the throne had this rose, it would have the power that the box from before had, that is the instrument which had the power to play a melody when it was placed on a species of wild or domesticated animal or bird. He examined further and saw that this rose, which was missing from the top of the throne, was placed below the throne. It was necessary to take it from there and place it on top. Then the throne would have the power of the box from before. The previous king had done everything with wisdom, in a way that nobody could understand the meaning, until someone extraordinarily wise would come along who could understand the matter and be able to align, exchange, and arrange everything properly. Likewise, he understood that the bed needed to be moved a bit from the place where it stood, so too the table also needed to be moved a bit to change its place slightly. Similarly, the lamp also needed to be moved a bit from its place, and the birds and animals also needed to have their locations changed. To take this bird from this place and put it in another place, and so too with all of them. The king had done everything with guile and wisdom in a way that nobody could understand, until a wise man would come along who would be able to understand how to arrange it all properly. The lion that stood there along the stretch of the road, the lion that stood there along the stretch of road needed to be placed here. And so with all of them needed to be placed here. And so with all of them, he ordered that everything be arranged properly, to take the rose from below and stick it above, and so too with all the items, to arrange everything in the proper order. Then they would all start playing the very wondrous melody, and they would all do the task they were designed for. Then they gave him the monarchy. The king's true son, who now had become king, spoke up and said to the maidservant's true son, "Now I understand that I am the king's true son, and you are the maidservant's true son." The following two are the words of our rebbe. And after he told this story, he spoke up and said these words. In earlier generations, when they would speak and discuss Kabbalah, they would use this type of language. Until Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai, they would not speak Kabbalah explicitly. Only Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai revealed Kabbalah explicitly. Before then, they would speak in this type of language when they placed the ark on the heifers. On the heifers, when they placed the ark of the heifers, they began to sing. Understand this. There is the renewal of the moon, when the moon receives innovations from the sun. This is the aspect of when they carry the ark to Beit Shemesh, house of the sun. Then all the animals carrying the throne made a new melody, the aspect of a song. Sing to God a new song. And this was the song that the heifers of Bashan sang. This is the aspect of bed, table, throne, and lamp, being the rectification of the divine presence. This is the aspect of bed, table, throne, and lamp, being the rectification of the divine presence, and the aspect of the garden. The first man was banished from the garden, and the Sabbath protected him. The Sabbath is the aspect of the king. To the king who had peace, to whom had peace, the aspect of the man in the story, who was a king, who had peace in his ways. Therefore he stood himself by the Sabbath. The rest he did not explain. Nanach, nachman, nachman, meuman. Until once there was a prayer leader who was always involved only with prayers and songs and praises to Hashem Yisbarach, and he dwelled outside of settled areas.